afternoon. I'm really delighted to be here. This has been an exciting 2 days of discussion, and I look forward to some additional discussion before we get to the end of the day. I'm here to talk about the contributions and future directions of the International Society for Biological and Environmental Repositories. ISBER was started back in 1999. It was started by a group of people who had been managing repositories from NCI, CDC, some academic institutions, and for-profit institutions. A very small group got together and started the society. Since that time, we've come an awful long way. We've grown tremendously, both in terms of our numbers of members and the scope of our activities. It's really been exciting to see our growth. The mission of ISBER, it is a global organization which creates opportunities for sharing ideas and innovations in biobanking and harmonizes approaches to evolving challenges for biological and environmental repositories. And you'll see that we are not just about human biospecimens, but we also include environmental repositories. Our vision is to be the leading global forum for promoting harmonized, high-quality standards, ethical principles, and innovation in the science and management of biorepositories. And you'll see that in addition to technical issues, we also address some of the ELSI issues. An overview of how we're structured. We are a global professional scientific society whose goal is to support biobanks worldwide. And we have two types of memberships. We have individual memberships and we have organizational memberships. Presently, as of 2014, we have over 1,000 individual and organizational members from 37 countries. One of our major goals is to expand our global reach even broader, and so we're working very hard on that. It's also important to note that we are a nonprofit 501(c) organization, and our funding comes primarily from memberships, corporate partnerships, and meeting registrations. We get no external funding. So most of the work that we do, or all of the work that we do, is relying on a very committed set of ISBER volunteers. We are governed by a board of directors, there are 10 of them, and ex officio board members that represent our committee chairs. ISBER committees range a number of different areas. There's an education and training committee, there's a membership and marketing committee, there's a publication committee, and there's a science policy committee, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the activities of that committee in a minute. In addition to these formal committees, we also have working groups that are less formal, that where ISBER members get together around an area of common interest. And usually there is a product, a white paper, or a publication that emanates from them. And then when we have very specific issues that we need to tackle, we pull together task forces in a very ad hoc way. Our society goals include disseminating information on repository management issues, and we do this in a number of ways. We have a ISBER group forum, which is an online tool for sharing information. We also disseminate information and share information at our annual meetings, through workshops, through publications in our journal, Biopreservation and Biobanking. We also develop a number of tools. Many of the tools that we have developed so far have been in the biospecimen science area. We have developed a tool called SPREC, which is a standard pre-analytical code, which is a way, of categorizing what happens to specimens in the pre-analytical phase. We also have a proficiency testing program to make sure that the analyses that our repositories are doing are of high quality. We've developed best practice guidelines, which I'll tell you about in a moment, and we are in the process of developing a centralized repository of existing information on repositories that exist. This is being carried out by our International Repository Locator Working Group. But the bottom line is we really are a convener. We bring our members together to work on emerging issues to discuss common challenges and ways of overcoming them. This just shows you the memberships by repository type, and you'll see that we do have a broad variety of repositories represented in our membership. However, the majority are from the human specimen domain. So let me focus for a moment. I'm not going to focus on many of the contributions that ISBER's made to the technical areas and specimen science areas, but I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our activities in the ELSI arena. The ISBER best practices for repositories is really our flagship product, if you will. The first edition was published in 2005. A second edition was published in 2008, and the third edition was published in 2010. And you can see that it covers a wide variety of topics from the technical issues involved with collecting specimens and processing them, but it also includes legal and ethical issues, issues related to specimen access, distribution, and use. This gives you just a little bit more detail about what's included in the ELSI section. Many of the issues that we've talked about today are included, including informed consent, protections from risk, access and utilization, benefit sharing, MTAs, data transfer. I won't read them all. The best practices are available on our website for download, and we will be updating this. I should also note that the best practices have been translated into Chinese, and a tool has also been developed it's called the SAT, which is a tool which helps repositories assess how closely they are following the ISBER best practices. That's also available on the website. Most of the work related to ELSI is done through our Science Policy Committee. This policy committee was established only several years ago. I was recently appointed a co-chair, and my colleague Nicole Seifert from MD Anderson is co-chairing along with me. We have members Lisa Gilbert, who is from Biostorage Technologies, William Grizzle from University of Alabama, Ty Hoover from MD Anderson, Paula Kim, who is a patient advocate, Yeonhee Lee, who manages a non-human repository in Korea, Katja Manhave, who works in Luxembourg, Helen Moore from the NCI, Helen Moran from New Zealand, Elena Salvatierra, who's a lawyer in Italy, Amelia Warner, who has a long background in industry, and Wendy Wolf, who has a great deal of experience with repositories at the Children's Hospital of Boston. As an advisor, we have Nick Seps from Australia. So you can see we have pretty broad representation. We want to expand the committee even further. We want to add additional representation from both Europe and the Asia Pacific region. The Science Policy Committee was really formed to be able to identify and address emerging ELSI issues. We communicate and address these issues that affect the biorepository community in responding to requests for public comment, and I'll tell you about some of those in the next few slides. Our major goal is to facilitate the collection, storage, distribution, and use of specimens for important research while at the same time protecting research participants. I mean, it would be very easy for us to take the position that we can't do certain things in the repository world because the regulations are getting in the way. We can't throw away the need to protect participants. Obviously, they, without their trust, we cannot do what we need to do. So some of the comments that we have provided input on are shown on this slide. And I'm not going to provide an exhaustive list of the issues that we identified, but to give you an example of some of the most important ones. Back in 2011, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in the U.S. proposed some changes to their federal human subjects regulations through an advance notice of proposed rulemaking. This proposal included a number of provisions that could have a significant impact on biorepositories, and so we commented on them in several areas. The first comment that we had was that biospecimens should not be considered identifiable in and of themselves. There was a question in the advance notice of proposed rulemaking about whether biospecimens should be considered identifiable. And our position was that certainly that those decisions have to be made on a case-by-case basis, depending on what data are also linked to it. We also commented on the importance of allowing leftover materials to be used with an IRB-approved waiver of consent under appropriate circumstances. One of the proposals in the ANPRM was that the use of even de-identified human specimens, anonymized human specimens, would require informed consent. And we noted that that posed particular problems for research using pathology archives. We also weighed in on the Australian government, some of the changes that they made to their regulations on human research. And we also responded to the EU data protection regulations that we've been talking about over the past several days. Again, we noted that the requirement for explicit specific consent would pose a big problem for global collaborations. The U.S. Presidential Commission for the Study of Bioethical Issues also requested comments on how to address incidental findings in the clinical setting, in the research, and in the research setting. And we weighed in about the practical implementation issues that return of incidental findings would have on biobanking activities, and noted that a one-size-fits-all approach can't be used. We advocated that rather than mandating return of research results from all biobanks, that biobanks should develop policies that are reflected in the informed consent. We also weighed in on a proposed draft genomic data sharing policy that came out of the NIH in 2003. This is very similar to the existing policy for sharing genome-wide association data. Basically, what these policies say is if that you are getting funding for these types of research, that you are expected to deposit your data into a centralized database at the NIH for broad sharing. And so we made some comments on that policy as well. We had the pleasure of reviewing the International Code of Conduct that the Genomics Alliance shared for public comment. We fully supported it, but noted the need that there had to be some flexibility for, under certain circumstances, of waivers of informed consent for retrospective collections. We also commented on some proposed changes to the Council of Europe working document on research on human biological materials. Again, some of the same types of comments. We advocated for the need for waivers of consent under appropriate circumstances, particularly for the storage of residual anonymized materials. We also recommended that biobank policies on individual feedback be included in the informed consent document and process. So I think that our comments are being heard. This was very nice. The Presidential Commission issued a report on incidental findings, anticipate and communicate. And in this report, they indeed had a case study on biobanking research where they recognized the complexities of the issues and actually quoted from the comments that we submitted. So it was good to see that it was not just going into a big black hole. So a few other ISBER LC activities real quickly. We were asked to provide comments by the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine on some points to consider for how to handle the derivation of induced pluripotent stem cells from previously collected research specimens. We provided that input. We attended a workshop with them and made some modification to their points to consider. It's a very useful document, I think, and it's available too on the on a website linked to the ISBER website. We have two new activities, a regulatory and ethics working group and a regulations task force. The regulations task force is a small group of people who are very interested in trying to get more authoritative information on what's happening globally with regard to tissue regulations and regulations affecting genetic research. And so we plan to work with this broader regulatory ethics working group to obtain information that our members may have access to. And there may be actually some opportunity here to work with some of the other activities of perhaps even BBRMI on that. We have discussions and workshops at annual meetings on a wide variety of topic areas that have led to key papers in the field. In particular, our discussions of return of research results resulted in a paper, a special session of genetics in medicine on that topic. We also co-sponsored an advanced tissue banking program with Public Responsibility in Medicine and Research. This is a professional society in the U.S., although they do have global representation. And the purpose of that was to engage and educate them on the issues that are facing the biobanking community, how biobanking works, and how to address some of these challenging LC issues. And we are doing this again in Baltimore. The title of our program is Contemporary Issues in Biobanking, Governance, Consent, and Practical Approaches to Current Challenges. We had a discussion at the last ISBER meeting on sustainability. I know this was an issue that some of the people attending this conference expressed a great deal of interest in, and the discussions at that meeting led to this special issue that just came out in October, and you may want to take a look. So moving forward, I think that there's many challenges, many of the challenges that we've been currently facing and probably some new ones. One is the broad variation in the types of biobanks. We've heard a lot today about one size does not fit all. We've heard a lot about population-based biobanks, but there are many other kinds of biobanks, hospital-based collections, specific research collections, pathology archives, and so on. And so as policy gets developed and tools get developed, we need to make sure that we develop tools for all the different kinds of repositories and tailor them fit to purpose. There are variation in regulations and policies globally. There's the evolving ethical and regulatory landscape. The landscape is changing in the US and as well as in the EU. And then there's a need to educate stakeholders, all of the stakeholders in biobanking research, and I think in particular policymakers, so that rational policy gets developed that allows important research involving biobanks to proceed. And then there's the unresolved emerging ethical issues. So I'm going to close with just talking about a number of future ISBER activities in which I think we can partner to try to disseminate information on governance best practices. One is ISBER is in the process of revising its best practices, and we intend to expand the best practices to include a more extensive discussion of governance. And perhaps we can talk here about ways to partner to help get greater input from the community. We're also talking about expanding the ISBER's best practices to include a section on financial sustainability, and we will be planning and co-hosting the International Biobanking Summit in collaboration with P3G and BioShare at the 2015 ISBER annual meeting. I'm going to skip over that in the sake of time. Our ISBER annual meeting will be in Phoenix. We invite all of you to join us. We're going to have several sessions on ELSI-related issues in particular. We're going to have a session on engaging participants and communities in biobanking research. I think it's going to be very interesting. So with that, I'd just like to acknowledge the people who are working on the various committees and board of directors and the ISBER membership who make these things happen. So thank you very much.